Welcome, everyone. We would ask you to get your lunch and settle into your usual city row, whichever row happens to be your city's usual row, so that we can begin our last pre-session meeting of the Legislative Policy Committee. All right, it feels like we still have a dull rumble, which means people are not finding their usual row to sit on. I'm looking at you, Lynn. Lynn Pace, please find your seat. All right. Welcome, everyone. As I mentioned, this is our last Legislative Policy Committee meeting before the legislative session begins. For those of you that don't have a countdown ticker to the end of the legislative session, or like Cameron's daughters, a Christmas tree ring counting down to the end of the session begins on the 21st. So we have a packed agenda, a lot of interesting things to discuss with you. The first order of business, though, is always to adopt the minutes of our November 18th meeting. Has everyone had a chance to thoroughly read, review, and enjoy the November 18th minutes? And would anyone like to make a motion? We have a motion from Richard Higginson of Bountiful. Do we have a second? All right, we have a second from Mike Blackham from Kaysville. Any discussion to the approval of the minutes? All right, all in favor, please say aye. Any opposed? Great, the minutes are approved. Just as a reminder, the league staff is trying out a way to save paper and trees with the check-in. If you are a voting member of LPC from your city, please utilize the QR code check-in so that we can see if this works and the league staff can stop killing trees by bringing multiple copies of the sign-in list up to the Capitol each week. Please note, and you can see it up here on the announcements, our local officials day is actually the second day of the session. It's Wednesday, the 22nd. We have over 20 new legislators this year. And so now is a great time to check in with the legislators that represent your city and make sure that they know about Local Officials Day, invite them to attend, invite them to sit with you at your table during the luncheon. And also please be sure to, if you've done those RSVPs, to pass that on to league staff so that they are aware, and also let them know if your youth council is going to be attending. Again, 20 new legislators, which means there's 20 great new opportunities to make sure that they become the best friends of your city and know who to go to for important feedback on city requests. With that, I need to turn the time over to Justin, and we'll go until that point where we reach the final motion at the end, and then I'll come back up. Here you go, Justin.
All right. Thanks, Kate. So start off, welcome everyone. Last time we'll see you here. Next time we see you will be Local Officials Day. So some of the Capitol, some of the Salt Palace. But next time we have this meeting, we will be in the Senate, Senate Room 210. So look forward to seeing many of you there. The fun fact about January 21st, not only is that the start of the legislative session, but is the 25th anniversary of the day I met my wife, who was, wait for it, who was a legislative intern when I met her. So there's that fun fact for you. So we have a ton of things to go over today. Long agenda, lots of things to talk about. Again, session coming up. You can see we've got LPC every Monday, not on President's Day. Please don't go up to the Capitol on President's Day for LPC. We won't be there. No one else will either. But we're on that day after, on the Tuesday after President's Day. Messages we need to give your legislatures, as always: partnership, not preemption. we've had a lot of good partnership over the years. I know it feels like partnership sometimes at the point of a gun, but we have ended off a lot of the sessions in a much better place than we thought we would in some of these. So as you're talking to legislators, as you're inviting them to local officials day, as you're getting to know the no one, just remind them that we want to partner with them, not be preempted. As we're dealing with housing, we want to have affordable home ownership, sustainable infrastructure, and quality of life. So if you need a quick message, there's the first one. And the second one, state doesn't have a surplus and neither do cities. This has been a message the last couple of years. I can tell you this year, this is a tighter budget year than we've seen even in the last few years. I'm hearing from many different legislators that the budget is tight. Jerry Stevenson, the exec appropriates chair in the Senate, last year his message to legislators was it's going to be a socks and underwear kind of Christmas. Talking about the tightness of the budget. This year he said, and sorry for those of you who already heard this morning, but this year he said to several legislators, it's the socks and underwear from last year and you're going to pay to wash them. So there is not a lot in the budget this year. So a reminder to them, they all know their budget is tight. Remind them we don't have any kind of surplus either as they're trying to foist things upon us. So with that, well, actually, before we get to that, we have a few new faces that are going to be working with us during the session, and we already like them more than Liam. Liam's here. We love Liam. We only give a really hard time to people we love that much. But and actually, wait, Liam and Alexa, Liam just had a baby last week, another one. So congrats to Liam. Congrats to his wife, Brooklyn. So he's not league staff anymore, but is still excited for his baby. So we do have two new faces. So over here, this is Megan Jacobs. She is our intern full-time for this session. Despite the fact that she goes to BYU, Cam let her work in the office. So Megan will be with us. You'll see her all session long. Excited to have her. And then in the back of the room here, we have Alexa Oldham. Alexa is our brand new policy analyst. So she is full-time with us. We're really excited to have her. She has been working with Steve Waldrop in the housing space. So really excited to have two new people on our team here, give us more bandwidth to do things. So get to know them. They're certainly going to be reaching out to you for research and other things, but really excited to have them with us. And now with that, Carson, kick it over to you for data and research.
Awesome. Thank you, Justin. I know this is everybody's favorite part of LPC because this is where we get to ask you for help. So last LPC we mentioned back in December, we mentioned that there'd be multi-part. We broke up the big land use survey we do every year into two different pieces. So last section was parking, and huge thank you to the 34 cities that responded to that parking survey. Your insights has been really critical into helping us understand how different parking proposals at the state level could affect municipalities. We'll put out a more formal report at some point for everybody to see. But we'll collect a little more information before that. The second part, which you'll be receiving this week, we'll be distributing it through the LPC list, and then we'll partner with the city managers again. Will be kind of the catch-all other housing and land use things we need to look at. So there'll be at least two parts to this. We're still working with legislators to pin down a couple other points, but the first big part will be accessory dwelling units. You'll have two Slido questions on ADUs today, but there'll be a little bit more of a deep dive in that survey. And then we'll also be asking more about plan review times. This has been, we first asked about this back in 2019 and then again in 2022, I believe it was. So this will be sort of updating that kind of data point, specifically trying to figure out how long it takes to process different kind of building applications through your plan review process. So please just be on alert. We'll be distributing that. I'll be following up with you if I don't hear from you. So yeah, we're excited to get that piece underway. And again, thank you in advance for all your time filling out our surveys. I know it's your favorite thing to do and your highest priority every week. So with that said, we're going to jump right into Slido. We will actually be, I think we have about 11, maybe 12 Slido questions for you today. Please keep your just Slido open on your phones or on your devices just throughout the meeting like you usually do. You'll be asked to sign in for your names. You can either do your name or your city. That just helps us understand which cities are impacted by different things, and it's a really useful data point. So I know people like to put fun names. That's fine as long as we can associate those names back to you. John Hiskey.
John, wait for the mic.
Sorry, yeah, what am I coming to you?
I'm sorry, for those of us not voting members, do you want us to participate in the Slido or just the voting members of LPC?
Thank you, John. That is an outstanding question. Unless otherwise specified, we ask everybody to participate in Slido. Slido is general membership feedback. These are not formal positions. Slido is really just to help us as staff better navigate issues, better understand the impacts on your municipalities. Again, you've heard us demonstrate how impactful it is, but really Slido is a critical piece of gathering information and make sure we're not just hearing from a minority of cities, but capturing a broader picture on different feedback. And then we take that Slido feedback to the board and help try to navigate issues that way, help understand maybe what our recommendations should be based on that feedback. And then the LPC voting members will be taking final positions. We're not taking any formal votes today, but come next week, ooh, I don't like that. We'll start taking formal positions. So yeah, be prepared for that. If you're an LPC voting member, hopefully you know if you are, then yeah, next week we'll be asking you to start taking positions. If you are not sure if you're a voting member, you can check on our website. We've implemented that new sign-in partly to save paper. Also, it's really helpful for us to make sure that we're making sure that voting members are signing in, voting members are participating. It helps us know if we have voting members who are consistently not participating to make sure that they know they're voting members, to make sure that they know about LPC. We just want to make sure that all of our LPC voting members are able to participate fully. So there's a couple of those changes, and we'll explain more of that process next week. Not next week, sorry, 2 weeks. That's our first LPC. I'm getting ahead of myself. So speaking of session, we want to start talking about some bills. We're not recommending changes on anything, or we're not making positions on anything today, but we're just trying to get some feedback. So I'll open up the first slide of today after this bill, but I wanted to explain this briefly. Representative Gracious has a proposal HB 81 that would prohibit municipalities or public water systems from fluoridating their water. This is a new topic for me, at least at the league. In the 7 years I've been here, I've not talked about water fluoridation at all. So it's a pretty simple bill. I have no idea how many cities fluoridate their water. So that'll bring me to this first Slido question, and I'll let everybody have a second to pull it up. You can either scan the QR code, you can go to slido.com/2304-232, whatever your preference is. All right, by a quick show of hands, does anybody need more time to get into Slido? Still see one or two phones up. Sorry for folks in the back here, that screen at least was not working earlier. I don't know if it is now. It's off, okay. Okay, well, I'm just going to jump in. You should still be able to sign in and participate. So first question should be pretty simple. Does your municipality provide fluoridated water? And there's 3 points here. First, yes, you do. No, you don't. And then if you're not sure, you can select that. That's totally fine. But we ask that you follow up. You can email me, keilers@ulct.org with that information. I know for some of you, this might be more complicated if you purchase water from another service or something and you're not sure if they do. So this, again, is just kind of a helpful data point so we can better understand what the impact of this bill actually is on us. Let's see. We've got some good numbers today, Justin. We might be pushing last year's record. Yeah, 131. You guys are on it today. All right, still see a few more phones. All right, well, I will move on. Again, please shoot me an email. We'll be asking for more granular feedback, particularly from the cities who do fluoridate their water. But we wanted to get kind of a rough estimate of who all this universe was before we started bothering all of you with questions. All right, so I'm going to move on. Again, we'll be asking Slido questions throughout. So I'm going to turn this over to Justin to go through some other fun new bills.
All right, bicycle lane safety amendments. This is a protected bill. So this is not a bill that's out public yet. Legislative research sent this over to us and said we could share language, we could get some feedback, but it's protected. It's so we can't, there's not a link to it yet. It's not out anywhere. And can't even say who the sponsor is yet, but we can show you some of the information. So this bill is seeking to clarify when motor vehicles may be in a bicycle lane, and then it restricts obstructing a bicycle lane. So the first slide here has the definition that's on there. You can read the definition of bicycle lane. On B, bicycle lane does not include shared lanes intended for both motor vehicle and bicycle travel. So if you got that, that's the universe of what we're dealing with the bicycle lane. Here's what the bill says. A person operating a motor vehicle may not drive within a bicycle lane except, and then we have a lot of exceptions here, briefly turning into an intersection when responding to striping traffic control devices, while operating various vehicles, snow vehicles, emergency vehicles, school buses, vehicle used by a postal service. Person operating a motor vehicle within the bicycle lane shall yield the right of way to all bicycle traffic within the lane. So that's the meat of the bill. That's the gist of the bill. So one, just any quick concerns or comments with this language. You could open up for a minute, but then the second piece is, if you've got questions, concerns about this bill, just reach out to me in the next few days so we can hear. So, yep, in the back here.
Yeah, we have a number of areas where it would be parking in the bicycle lane as opposed to traveling.
Yep.
How is that going to tie into this?
Yeah, and that's a great question. I don't think it talks about that directly. So, yeah, parking is a good question. So I don't know the answer again. I haven't talked to the sponsor, but that's a great question. Any other comments or questions? Yep. Wait for Megan. She's going to get you the mic there.
Just from an enforcement standpoint, briefly is going to be very hard to litigate. So I think even having some type of distance requirement would be better than just stating briefly.
Okay, that's a great note. Thank you. Good attorney thought. All right, if you have other thoughts about the bill, please reach out to me. Let's say we can talk to the sponsor about it. This is one that's coming up, but hasn't been put out public. So just wanted to make sure we got that in front of you. The next one is cannabis production amendments. This is also a protected bill that's not out public, but the sponsor did say we could reach out on this one just to see if there's any quick feedback or concerns on this one. So this is one that came from the Cannabis Working Group. Heard information about situations specifically in Davis County where odors from an indoor growing had impacts on the surrounding businesses and neighbors. So this is the summary of the legislation. This isn't the specific legislation. So in concept, just looking for some quick feedback. So one, requires cannabis production establishments to include an odor reduction / mitigation plan as part of their operating plan submittal. Requires the Department of Ag to create recommendations or standards for control. Clarifies provisions related to land use for medical cannabis production establishments with the intent to make it clear that cannabis facilities are subject to local odor ordinances. Say that 5 times fast. Regardless of when they take effect, similar to other businesses. And then finally, requires all new production facilities to be in a standalone building. So that is what the sponsor is proposing. Overall thoughts. So any quick thoughts on this one or feedback that we can give back to the sponsor? Quick straw poll. Does anyone have any big concerns with this one? Cassidy has concerns? Or someone online? Oh, from online. Perfect.
Paul Larson said, "We are dealing with the cannabis odor issue right now in Brigham City. Burning of waste has sent students home sick from Box Elder High School." So
Okay.
more of a comment.
So comment. Great. Thank you, Paul. All right. If no one has any concerns, then that's what we'll send back to the sponsor. Yeah, Mayor.
Smells awful in Centerville.
Smells awful in Centerville?
With Representative Cutler.
It's impossible to get rid of the smell, and we have a no smell ordinance, so. But we're working on it.
Okay, perfect. Well, I'm sure he will like that feedback. I'm not saying he's a sponsor, but he's the sponsor. Okay, with that, turn it over to Molly for homelessness.
Hello. It's been a minute since we've had a chance to discuss this as the full league membership. And there's been a lot of change and there will continue to be a lot of change. So the big takeaway I want all of you to know is that the policy landscape is changing pretty dramatically, and it will have repercussions on mitigation funding, public safety, and more. In December, the Utah League Board reaffirmed the guiding principles that we as staff use to negotiate and engage on homelessness bills. We're going to pull out 2 of those provisions for you later that we want to highlight. New stakeholders are getting involved in this, and there is limited coordination. That's again why I want to show you some of our principles, because there is kind of contradictory legislation that is out, or we anticipate will be coming out, that we'll need to navigate. And there are new facilities coming online. A new family facility is slated to open in South Salt Lake that will accommodate about 300 people. A new tiny home village just opened up in Salt Lake City, and we are still anticipating the transformative central campus coming online, which is currently slated to have about 1,100 beds. The exact details of that are pending. We're anticipating it will be in Salt Lake County somewhere. The Utah State Homelessness Board will be discussing some locations on Wednesday in a closed meeting. It is my understanding that municipalities that could be hosting this are aware of such. So I don't think there will be a big surprise or gotcha for anyone, but keep us posted and we will do the same. The governor included about $18.8 million in his proposed budget for homelessness. 5.8 of that is for the new family shelter in South Salt Lake. 13 is what is proposed for the new central campus and statewide response. And then additionally, just within the current landscape, we're seeing increased scrutiny for municipal public safety responses, especially in Salt Lake City. So that's kind of where we are right now. Just so you're aware, as we have this conversation, shelter cities are still subsidizing quite a bit of the cost of hosting a shelter in their communities. The mitigation fund has about $17.5 million in it, about 10 from local contributions, 7.5 from state. I'm still finalizing, working with the shelter cities to kind of finalize what those deficits are. So we will present that to you once we have them, but I would rather take a minute and make sure we're presenting an accurate number than get you a number now that might not be correct. So these are 2 provisions that the League Board addressed that I want to flag for you all. So one is that ULCT will collaborate with the Office of Homeless Services to provide incentives for jurisdictions to participate in long-term solutions. This could include increased financial contributions to the mitigation fund, qualifying mitigation offsets like zoning for and permitting permanent supportive housing, domestic violence shelters, or other qualifying facilities. Additionally, we have a provision that says cities with homeless resource centers or equivalents, so these qualifying shelters, should be reimbursed for most of their direct and indirect public safety costs as identified by key metrics. So I just want to flag that for you as we kind of chat mitigation, because there are 2 bills that kind of speak to each of these pieces. So the first one is a numbered bill by Nelson Abbott, HB 118, and it essentially allows a bit of that offset that we were discussing. So it allows a municipality that contributes to the fund to reduce their mitigation contribution by essentially 50% of each dollar that they spent in an effort to achieve the goals outlined in code, which is the homeless to housing account. If it exceeds kind of double what their mitigation contribution would be, they do not contribute to the fund. Technically, this bill does not work as drafted because cities, the homeless to housing account is a state account that is used by the state government. It is not something that municipalities access, use, and so kind of the way this bill is drafted right now functionally does not work, but it does present a concept that we wanted to be sure to present to you. Conversely, we know that there is a bill that Representative Elison will be sponsoring that will be looking to increase the municipal contribution to the mitigation fund in an effort to, again, close that deficit that the shelter cities are facing. And he's also looking to prohibit camping on state land unless it is specifically authorized by that agency that owns the land. This is something that Midvale flagged as an issue. And this is something that I would love for you to report back to me. Right now, there isn't a clear state law that prohibits camping on state land. And so if you have an issue with unsanctioned camping on state land in your jurisdiction, whether that is a UDOT property, whether that is kind of anything else, please let me know so that we can figure it out. We want to make sure that we're cleaning up this issue for the cities that it is an issue in, and we don't want to create more problems for other folks down the line in other ways. So that is one piece of homework. If you have state land that you're having an issue with, specifically with homelessness, please let me know. We're also expecting a bill from Representative Clancy that should be numbered this week. It is going to have, from what we've heard, increased scrutiny on shelter operations and conditional use permits that are awarded to shelters. There will likely be adjustments to JRI and harm reduction programs. And they've mentioned increased flexibilities for cities to address flop houses, but no real clear indication on what or how that would work. So we're just hanging tight and waiting for that legislation to see what this is going to look like. Representative Grant Miller is looking to create a homeless bill of rights. And again, just kind of like with these contradictory things, we're seeing more pressure to make sure that cities are abating camps and cleaning up these public areas. Miller's bill, as we kind of understand it now, could allow someone to sue over personal property destruction during a camp abatement. And so again, we're just kind of navigating these different policies that are a little contradictory as we move on. Senator Jen Plum has drafted the homeless the Homeless Individuals Protection Amendments, which would create essentially a homeless ombudsman within OHS. It's my understanding of the bill right now that it is largely focused on service providers. I am working to touch base with her just to see if there would be any municipal impact, but right now it does seem largely focused on that service provider path. Also to specify, sorry, I'm trying to be tight on time, but with both this and the other numbered bill, House Bill 118, we are encouraging that we don't take a position. Just we want to figure out what these bills are, how they're going to work, and how they're going to fall into the broader landscape of the other homeless legislation coming out. And finally, we've been talking about this a bit. We do anticipate that we're going to be getting code red this year. Again, we do not know exactly what it will look like, but we imagine that a lot of the mechanic and obligation for municipalities will be somewhat similar to what Code Blue was, which is you don't necessarily need to provide anything, but you can't say no to something being provided within your jurisdiction. And then additionally, a big caveat from Code Blue is that it would likely only be operational during the daytime, so no overnight services provided. But again, report back. We're negotiating this. We're trying to figure out what this is going to look like. So if there's any specific considerations you would like league staff to be aware of, please let me know. And then finally, just a few other kind of rumblings. We haven't heard of this going in a specific bill, but it's our understanding that they will be adding someone with lived experience to the state homelessness board, and they will not be increasing the size of the board, which means that someone who has a seat on the board will no longer have a seat. So we're keeping an eye on that to make sure our municipal seats are protected. Again, there's increased scrutiny and possible intervention with public safety. Some conversations about an ongoing revenue source specifically for operations. And there has been some murmuring about a reduced role of the state in funding homeless interventions and more expectations on counties and municipalities. So that's what we're hearing right now. As more bills come out, as we get more details, we'll be sure to keep you posted. If you have any questions, comments, concerns, always let me know. Thank you.
Happy New Year, everybody. It's great to see so many people in person and online. Thank you for joining us, and thank you for gearing up for the pleasure of the next 8 weeks or so. Carson just updating this with some updated Slido questions, and then we will get started on the housing piece here. As always, lots of moving pieces here. We have a few key objectives that we want to accomplish in the next few minutes with this group. First, I want to just bring you up to speed because now there's a little more meat on the bones from when we last met of all of the different stakeholder groups that are in the housing space. We also have a few data questions, as Carson referenced earlier, that we're going to be putting in front of you both today via Slido and in the follow-up email. And it's data that we really do need to gather this week to help inform our strategic next steps. The League Board of Directors will meet next Wednesday on Local Officials Day at the end of that day. And so, again, the feedback you provide to us, we go through every last tidbit of it, analyze it, and then either bring it back to LPC or we bring it back to the board or the officers, and that's what we'll be doing at board meeting next week. Okay, you remember this slide from a couple of months ago, and now there is, as I mentioned, meat on the bones. I'll start in the blue, the governor's transition. The governor has now been inaugurated anew for his second four-year term, and this, by quick show of hands, anybody know which one the governor is in this picture? So this is the governor's strategic plan for the second term. And I do want to thank the governor's team because they incorporated league representatives as they were building out the strategic plan. And this piece of it was called PLACE. And in the PLACE, it talks about housing objectives and metrics. This goes into it a little more detail around housing and infrastructure, including the 35,000 starter home goal by 2029. Transportation and safety, energy and environment, recreation and water, and a lot of overlap with what we do at the local government level. So the strategic plan is now out. How much legislation will come from the strategic plan in 2025 is a little bit up in the air, but it'll certainly be the focus for the next 4 years. Meanwhile, coming back to this slide down here, the bottom red, we talked about UEOC and GOEO and Salt Lake Chambers Utah Rising. Well, that document is now out. So this is from the Salt Lake Chambers Public Policy Guide around Utah, called Utah Rising. This is the housing section of it. There's a lot of good information in there. Guide. This is the housing focus. And a couple of interesting things to take away from this. Number one, we urge the legislature to support timely housing development, expedite the review of applications for housing developments. If you just stopped it there, it would be consistent with what we've heard in the past. But I think this piece is really important because it demonstrates that the data that you helped us provide to legislators and others is resonating, because the second half of it says, quote, to break open the backlog of entitled lots. So there is that acknowledgement now that didn't exist a few years ago about how many lots are entitled and planned for and are stuck for a variety of reasons. Now, based on our data, the primary reason why they're stuck is infrastructure costs. In this case, they're talking about the timeliness of land use processes. But I think the fact that they're referencing the backlog of entitled units speaks volumes to the work collectively we've done in trying to tell that story at the Capitol. And the second one, enact affordable housing incentives, employee tax incentives, eliminate exorbitant fees, and enact zoning reforms to encourage developers to increase Utah's affordable housing stock. But then the last one, support infrastructure, support housing development, also very well could have been, this one could have been word for word something that any mayor or council member would have said about how do we get more infrastructure funding around the allocated housing plots. So again, acknowledging all the planning that has been done and units that are stuck due to a lack of infrastructure. At the unveiling of this document, the Salt Lake Chamber event last Friday, these are the headlines, one of the headlines from it, what Utah business wants from the legislature this year. Speaker Schultz and President Adams were both on a panel with the chamber, and there were several key takeaways that I want to make sure this group knows. One, Speaker Schultz talked about government inspection and zoning processes, but then in the same breath, and it's reflected in the article, quote, he stressed the importance of collaborating with municipalities. And then he talked about how in recent years, cities had taken a lot of pushback from the public, but it approved a lot of apartment units, and you've seen the rents start to soften in apartment complexes. And so now we need to do that same thing on ownership. And throughout that meeting, he emphasized collaboration with cities as we work together on this. Another interesting headline piggybacks on something that we presented to LPC back in August, and we've been waiting to see if there'll be potential legislation, and that gets to wildfire risk. There have been several headlines about this with the tragedies that are underway in California. And the impact on the insurance market with wildland urban interface. Interesting fact, California is #1 in the country for the number of housing units that have been built within the wildland urban interface in the last 10 years. Any guess on which state is #2? Utah, yes, Utah, not in Murray, Councilmember, not in Murray, but statewide, Utah is #2. And this was a focus of some discussions in the summer, and we think it will pick up again in the session. Again, no legislation yet, but just to give you the overview of what's being discussed in the business community. Now, the third piece from that graphic was the state housing plan. And that Utah state housing plan, again, I want to give credit where credit is due to the governor's office, who's been spearheading the Utah housing plan. It's been a very collaborative effort. The league's been involved in it. Both Mayor Silvestrini, as a former league president, on the steering committee. Several league staffers, myself included, have been on the technical committee, and they've reached out to a variety of other stakeholders to be as collaborative as possible as they're building out phase 1 of the state housing plan. You'll note it says coming soon. I've been told that it'll be January 17th, which, checking calendar, that's the Friday before the long weekend before the session starts. So now I have my long weekend reading, although I've already read it. So I actually don't need to reread it because I've already read it. But phase 1 will come out this Friday, and phase 1 is going to be focused on the overall goals, the success metrics, and the principles. And actually, we presented those principles to the League Board of Directors previously. Phase 2 is going to pick up after the session. And phase 2 will come as they're working through the buy-in from stakeholders, including local government and legislators. Phase 2 is scheduled to start in April. So as you're thinking about the upcoming session that starts on next Tuesday, we have the short term of the next 8 weeks, and then we have really the next 8 months after that in anticipation of the 2026 session. So there'll be no rest for the weary, but we want to make sure that whatever we do this upcoming session doesn't inadvertently undermine the efforts that are going on with the state housing plan and sets up the dialogue for success in the state housing plan in the interim. So with that, nope, those didn't show up. That's right. With that, before I pivot to potential legislation, are there any questions about kind of those moving pieces outside of specific bills? Councilmember Higginson.
Cam, are they considering success metrics for anything retroactively or just on legislation going forward?
Yeah, excellent question. And Carson, is it fair to say that you've spent probably months in this space now trying to identify what the metrics should be, how we're going to track those metrics, which ones are actually trackable, how we look backward and forward. So do you want to give some feedback? And then Laura Hansen's here with the governor's office. Laura, if there's anything you want to add in that piece, I'm happy to hear it too.
Yeah, thanks, Cam. I think it's fair to say that this plan is trying to figure out like the high level metrics, like what we're trying to get to, how we can measure success, rather than the really granular details of, is X policy working and how do we measure that? So I think that this is more big picture, what does success look like? And I'll just add a little more feedback here. I think one of the things I've heard from you many times is what problem are we trying to solve with housing? And that the answer to that has evolved over the years, but it still feels like in many of the different venues that we kind of just keep the analogy I like to use is driving around before we actually have put where we're going into our GPS and we're trying to figure out where we're going on the fly. So I think that's how much of the housing conversation has felt in the past. This is an effort to get ahead of that and say, we're going to try to figure out where we're going first, figure out the high level metrics for success first, and then the tactics will be figuring it. Like there'll be different tactics for each, or different success metrics for each individual tactic. So I think that's kind of the big picture answer. And there's even been some questions in the chat that I've seen about, are we measuring success with previous bills? The answer is we've tried to, where possible. We've tried to be able to show where things have worked or haven't worked. But oftentimes I think the discussion just moves on without looking backwards. So that's, I think, the value of the state housing plan is it's trying to get everybody on the same page about what success looks like. So when we see a bill that for league members, it might be asking cities to do more, but at the same time, it helps us be able to say, X policy that's being discussed in 2026 might be outside the scope of the state housing plan, or at least be able to reframe things that way. So Laura, I don't know if there's anything else you want to add, but okay, great.
Perfect. Thank you, Carson. Once the phase one draft goes public, we'll circulate it. Ideally, it'll be in Friday Facts this Friday, so you can take a look at it. And then Councilmember Higginson, one other piece I want to add here is Steve Waldrop made a comment at an event recently, which I thought really encapsulated our current situation here. He said it's going to take us 2 to 3 years to know if what we did 2 to 3 years ago has made a positive difference. And I thought that was really excellent framing. And I'll give a specific example of this. So now, almost 4 years ago, the legislature created the HDRZ tool. That was the 2021 session. It took a little while for the HDRZ tool to get utilized. Now 7 communities have done it, and there are a few more in the pipeline. Well, in those 7 communities around their transit stops, they are planning for 42,000 housing units that are facilitated because of the HDRZ. Based on GOEO's analysis, which is the but-for analysis to qualify for the HDRZ, if there wasn't the HDRZ financing available, GOEO estimated that those same transit stops would have generated about 16,000 housing units. So 16,000 housing units without HDRZ, 42,000 housing units with the HDRZ. We didn't know that the year after that bill passed. We didn't know that 2 years after the bill passed. We know that today. Now, those units aren't necessarily being built yet, but they've been approved, or excuse me, the plans have been approved. And now I hope that in 2 to 3 years, we'll have a really good success story to tell from Farmington to South Jordan who have done these HDRZs. So that is one of the sticking points, is how do we make sure we're tracking the right data to tell the story of what's happening, both for positive reasons and for pivot reasons. Lynn?
Yeah, Cameron, this question may be premature, but is the state housing plan, does it anticipate is it an objective based plan? Like here's our targets, or is it also an implementation plan of here are our targets and here's how we propose to reach them? Or is that something you can share?
Yeah, excellent question. And the answer as of today, I would answer it as all of the above, but not all at the same time. So right now, phase one is, here are the core principles. If we all agree on these core principles, then you pivot to the data and the metrics. And if we all agree on these data and metrics, then that in turn can inform the conversations of what does everybody need to do in their respective capacities in order to meet I'm not going to use the word target, but in order to meet the objectives. So I think it's been wise by the leadership of the state housing plan folks to say, we can't do all of this at the same time. So let's do it in phases to make sure you've got the buy-in around the principles and the data first. And we've been preaching for years, let's get good data to help drive these conversations. The tactics piece, Lynn, that you're referencing of, has everybody done this or done that? That's going to be a difficult conversation for sure. That's a after 2025 session conversation. Carlton, former league president, Christensen.
Yeah, thank you. And sorry, I realize I shouldn't ask questions here, but in that same chamber meeting, one of the panelists, and I'm not positive who, suggested that a quarter of the cost of housing came from local regulation. And I just wondered if you had any background as to how they got to that number. And then the second piece of it is the chamber mentioned it, they didn't, to the cost of housing and the ability to actually build those houses is the availability of labor. And I'm afraid that number or that factor keeps getting looked past, that even if you could build it, there may not be the labor to actually construct it. And I just wondered if that's part of the conversation.
Perfect. Carson, I'll let you hit the first piece and then I'll take the very easy question about labor supply.
Yeah, so the 25% number usually traces back to a National Association of Home Builders study from, was that 2017, 2018? They've updated it once or twice, but that's been the genesis of it. And I think it's important to emphasize that in that study, they weren't just asking about local land use or local regulations. They were asking about all regulations. And it was just an estimate. If you look at the survey fields, at least on the previous ones, it was just an estimate of, or the field was just approximately how much of your cost do you think it would is due to government regulation. So that would include things like OSHA, that would include things like building code. And I think that's I think it's a difficult stat for us because there's lots of regulations that are municipally imposed, lots outside of our control. But beyond that, that's averaged across a lot of different states around the country. Utah cities probably are less regulatory heavy than cities in some other larger states. And then even beyond that, that presumes that those buildings would not be built to those same standards or those, like OSHA is a good example. Does that mean that you wouldn't be using any of the same safety practices, but for regulation? So do we hear that talking point a lot? I think it's something worth pushing back on because I think that deserves a lot more nuance. And even if you include impact fees in that calculation, which are nowhere near 25% of the cost of a home, impact fees are what are paying for the infrastructure that lets the home have running water. So I think that cost of regulation is something that deserves a lot more examination, but we still hear that talking point come up over and over and over again.
Yeah, excellent point, Carson. It is something we've tried to push back on regularly, and ultimately infrastructure is not free. So you've got to pay for infrastructure somehow. The second point that Carlton referenced that came up in that chamber meeting around labor supply touches both on the status quo of labor supply and even though Utah has seen significant growth in the construction industry in recent years, it's still insufficient to meet the demand everywhere. But the chamber also talked about in the context of immigration and potential changes to immigration policy, as well as potential tariffs having impacts on supply chains and materials, both of which could lead to increased costs for housing production. So too soon to tell, but those are points that came up in that chamber meeting too. We constantly raise at the Capitol. We can't control labor costs and material costs and land costs, inflation and interest rates. All those things are outside of our control, which is why you'll note that even in the chamber's document, it was focused on timeliness and infrastructure in more detail than some of the other comments maybe they would have made in the past. Okay, let's jump then to some bills that we have in front of us now in the housing space. But I wanted to give you that big picture perspective as we get into the nitty gritty here. So within the Commission on Housing Affordability, there are things that are going to impact all cities. The public asset inventory and state surplus land for housing. I'll talk about that momentarily. I'll talk about parking momentarily. In italics, you'll see MIHP ownership submenu. Put a pin in this one because we're going to report back to you with our staff recommendation based on the feedback you've given us via slide over the last couple of months. Okay. Infrastructure and then land use task force. Jared's going to handle the land use task force issues that are before us. Then specific to these three different groups of cities, and the legacy city side, I am cautiously optimistic about some movement in the condo space to unlock the development, the financing, and insurance costs around condos. And there'll be a land use component too. And then there's also general support for the idea of the revolving loan fund to renovate houses from rental houses to ownership houses, which is a program that Ogden City has been championing for years, but there's interest in partnering that on the state level. And so Ogden, so Ogden, before you guys leave, Janine and Marcia, I just need to circle back with you to set up a meeting with you and your team about some potential language and where this could fit into statute. I was with Steve Waldrop this morning. I told him I would see Ogden today, so thanks for making me look good. And I told him we'd circle back with him with some language this week. The rapid growth, we're still trying to improve the technical assistance, particularly for those communities on the periphery that don't have a lot of staff, but have growth banging down their doors. And then in the resort community space, the bill's not numbered yet, so we don't have it in front of you, but we're cautiously optimistic that we can make some progress in the short-term rental space, both on the data collection side and on the regulation side. And then I'll talk about tourism taxes momentarily. So here's just a quick snapshot of the dialogue at the Capitol and the ULCT box. These have been the principles we've been championing: focus on ownership, affordability, sustainable infrastructure, quality of life. Legislators, generally speaking, have said we want to see units that meet the league principles. So our principles have resonated with legislators to the degree where most legislators, if you talk to them, they will say, how do we get more owner-occupied units that are actually affordable and make sure we take care of infrastructure? So that's been a success story over the last few months. Most, but not all, of the proposals we've seen thus far, including the ones we'll present to you here momentarily, are in the tools option space as opposed to the mandate space. And then That picture I showed you earlier of the governor with the shovel, that was at the Nielsen Project, which we presented to this group in West Weber County. The governor was at the groundbreaking of that event, and most legislators are aware of that project. They're saying, how do we get more small, single-family detached, owner-occupied, affordable units like that project built around the state? And then the tension points and the sticking points, one size fits all, cities shouldn't be punished for what we don't control. And some places market just won't produce affordable units, but just, it feels like every day we get a narrative about X cities, land use processes, and what that's meaning to affordability. And that's not exaggeration. We probably get a call or an email every day about somebody, and we track a lot of them down and are able to address them. And so thank you when you get a call from me saying, this is what we've heard, and you give us information. That's super helpful because then we can relay that back to state leaders. Sometimes we're in the wrong, sometimes we're not, but it's helpful follow-up. Okay, let's start talking about bills. House Bill 37 is Representative Jim Dunnigan's bill. This is the bill that was at political subdivisions in November. So when we last met in November, I presented the concepts of this bill, but the bill wasn't out yet. So I told you, can't take a position on a bill you all haven't read yet. House Bill 37 is that bill. There are three components to it. Number one is the drafting of an optional overlay for affordable homeownership. It's enabling language. It doesn't require it of cities. Option two, or concept two, is additionally reporting metrics. So coming back to what Councilman Higginson was referencing earlier, there's in the bill right now, there are a lot of data sets that would be required of us. Number three is a requirement that after the session, every city and town in the state would have to be part of a housing region to create sub-regional plans around housing, but all the details are still to be determined. It leaves it really open-ended because in my conversations with Representative Dunnigan, he didn't want a top-down approach. He wanted to say, here's the direction, and then you guys figure it out after the session. As of now, our recommendation is position pending. And you'll see in blue here that we want to propose the ownership submenu, which I'll come to in a moment, as in lieu of that concept number one. On the reporting metrics, once the state housing plan comes out, we want to try to align those so that we're just asking for one data set rather than two different data sets. And then on the regional plans, this has been a component of the housing plan. We've asked this group in two different LPCs for your feedback on what this could look like. And quite honestly, your feedback's been pretty mixed. It's been really helpful to us, but it has been kind of mixed. And so we want to have the one place where there has been some alignment from the membership via Slido has been focusing on regional infrastructure as opposed to housing in general, focus on regional infrastructure coordination. And that's scored pretty well. So our recommendation right now would be position pending and work through those three different pieces. Let me pause there before I keep going, see if there are any questions about the bill and about the staff recommendation for now. Okay, this is my favorite slide of the whole thing because there's lots of colors and lots of words, and I even put those emojis in, which I was pretty excited about. Sorry, Cassidy. The nicer slide, like the housing plan one, that was all Cassidy. This one, the thumbs ups and downs are all me. And then after she built it with the colors, I went and doubled the amount of text that was on here. But we're basically reporting back to you that A through F are all concepts we've surveyed from you in the last 2 months. And the thumbs up, A, B, and C, are where either the board or LPC subgroup have said, yeah, these are workable concepts. D was a little mixed, depending how we ask the question. And then E and F were thumbs down. So this is just simply to report back to you that when you give us all those responses via Slido, we go through it to try to figure out, okay, what's our path? This gives you an idea of what's out there right now in the housing space. These are different housing bills. I just talked about House Bill 37 from Representative Dunnigan. I'm going to come to Representative Ward's bills in a moment, 88 and 90. Representative Walter and Representative Chevrier have concepts. They're not in bill form yet, but you can see Dunnigan, Walter, and Chevrier are all in the optional space of how do we create a zoning tool that is focused on affordable homeownership with the infrastructure provided. Well, based on your feedback via Slido, rather than having a whole bunch of new zoning tools, this is what we'd like to offer as in lieu of creating the new one overlay in statute, we do an ownership MIHP submenu this year. Piece one would be existing or new action to do one of those things that are highlighted. So HDRZ, a FIZ, a HOPS, approve a House Bill 572 project. Those all exist now. E and F would be the enabling language for Cameron City to do a density bonus for affordable home ownership for single family lots or affordable home ownership density bonus for multifamily condos. So if it's, and then detached ADUs with an ownership component. So if a city did one of those and Salt Lake H, the equivalent ordinance would be what Salt Lake has done. So it's trying to capture what's already been done out there. And the idea here is really twofold. Number one, let's focus on ownership within the MIHP menu items. Right now, MIHP is pretty silent when it comes to ownership. So let's focus it on ownership. Number two, and this comes back to the housing plan, MIHP is going to change this coming summer. So recognizing it's going to change, we're viewing this as the bridge to that change, and the bridge would be focused on ownership. And the idea here is that if you do one of these submenu items, it would count as 3, and you'd be automatically in compliance. If you pass your ordinance this year, you'd be automatically in compliance for this year. So it simplifies the MIHP reporting for both the state and for us, while it's bridging us toward the state housing plan. Then we'd report on how often builders have requested the tool and how often it's been used. So that's the concept, that instead of creating all these different optional overlays in all those different bills, including House Bill 37, we do it this way. We've surveyed these concepts, but this is our staff recommendation to bring it back. Any thoughts on it? Hold on, give me 1 sec. Do we have a mic? Okay. So the question from Kaysville is, would it be a zoning overlay or development agreement? The language on the screen is enact ordinance, but I think if you did it via development agreement, I think that should count too, because you're getting to the same outcome. So other questions about this concept? Carson, anything online? So to just give you a sense of how we use your feedback, this was LPC in October. We asked you if you'd be willing to grant a density bonus to incentivize affordable owner occupied condos instead of apartments in multifamily areas. So you would decide where that goes. I mentioned the state's working on some funding concepts to help support the creation of condos in lieu of rental properties. And 65% of you were in the probably yes, definitely yes space, 24% uncertain. You can see a really small amount were in the no. So we've asked these types of questions to you over the last couple of months. We have about 10 of them now, and that's what's led to the creation of this recommendation. So we're going to proceed taking this to Representative Dunnigan and the other legislators, barring any other pushback or concerns. Okay, so that would be piece one of House Bill 37. Piece two was the data piece. I mentioned we want to align that with the state housing plan. Piece three was on the regional housing plan. This is just a quick snapshot of the unanswered questions that you've provided back to us. So it's really more just us reporting back to you. This is what you've told us of questions you'd like to have answered as we work toward whatever this could look like in the long run. We have shared a deeper analysis of this with Steve Waldrop and with Laura and others in the governor's team. And so we'll keep working through this. And you'll see that last question of how does this align with other infrastructure plans is really the key one. So speaking of infrastructure, let's pivot now to House Bill 88 and House Bill 90. As drafted, our staff recommendation would be to oppose House Bill 88. We're meeting with Representative Ward later this week. House Bill 88 is currently drafted, allows detached ADUs by right in all cities within first and second class counties, which is all counties above 185,000 in population. And then you can see what the other two pieces of his bill would do. What's been interesting about this bill is we've had a lot of legislators who've said to us they want to do something in the detached ADU space, whether it's Ray Ward's bill or something else, they want to do something in detached ADU space. We have some data right now about what cities are doing in the detached ADU space, but we've recognized that it's incomplete. So that's where we need your help. we're going to start here via Slido, and then this will also be part of the follow-up homework assignment. So if you don't know the answer right this second, that's okay. But we do need to answer these couple of questions this week so we can take it back to some state leaders. So what is your city's detached ADU policy? Don't allow them anywhere, allow them on all lots. Those would be the two ends of the spectrum. Allow them on lots larger than a third of an acre, allow them on lots larger than a quarter of an acre. There's more, we recognize there's going to be more nuance in this, but this was just a quick snapshot. And I see a lot of people, I see a lot of electeds looking at their staffs. So I'm glad that we have some good staff attendance here to help. Carson.
And I just want to mention really quickly, I said before, but there'll be more detailed questions about ADUs on that survey that we'll send out. So again, Cam said, this is just a very quick snapshot to see approximately where people are at so we can tailor questions to members more than just what we think would be useful. So we'll add more detail in that. And if you're not sure, you can just leave this blank and answer it in the survey later.
Great. Thank you, Carson. Okay. Mark, so Megan or Alexa can maybe take it back to Mark.
I go out right here if that's all right.
Oh, Mayor, sorry.
You're okay.
Yeah.
So an answer to this question could be we're working on one right now.
Yeah.
We don't allow them, but we're working on one.
Yep. Yeah, you and I chatted about this last Monday. So yeah, that'll be picked up more in the follow-up, more nuanced survey.
Okay.
But yeah, I'm aware of our conversation last Monday. So thank you, Mayor. Mark?
So we do allow them in a specific zone, but we don't have a checkbox that works. How do you want us to answer that?
Yeah, leave it unanswered for now. That's fine. Again, this was just a quick snapshot because we've built the survey, but we knew we may need to tweak the survey based on the feedback from today's meeting. Okay, here's the next question. If the state required detached ADUs be allowed on all residential lots greater than a quarter acre, what would the impact be on your city's infrastructure? So this is really focused on your particular city. Quarter of an acre, we basically plucked that number as just a starting point because we just want to get a sense of how would that impact your infrastructure. And I asked the question in part because a conversation I've had with Lehigh City. Lehigh City has been looking at doing a density bonus program for owner occupancy. I was at their city council meeting last week as they were presenting it. But one concern that I've discussed with Mayor Johnson has been, if we think we've got infrastructure capacity to do this density bonus over here, we might not be able to do that if the state mandates us to do this over here. So that's why we want to get a sense from this group about the potential impact. We will be bringing what comes out of that Lehigh discussion on density bonuses back to the league membership later. I was at the council meeting for a couple of hours on Tuesday as they were deliberating on it. So stay tuned. Okay. Sorry. Okay, I'm going to move on here. So our recommendation is to oppose House Bill 88 as currently drafted. Any other thoughts or comments on that staff recommendation? Okay, and I'm going to move on. House Bill 90. House Bill 90 does two things. One, it allows lots of 4,000 square feet by right in all residential areas in all cities within counties of the first and second class. So counties of 185,000 or more. So basically Weber, Davis, Salt Lake, Utah, and Washington counties, and Cache County is right on the cusp of becoming a second class county. I noted in the PowerPoint that it's silent about sufficient infrastructure or a link to affordability or ownership. Likewise, it would require cities to allow housing by right in all commercial areas in those same areas. We've outlined, Norm, as the microphone makes its way over here to Norm, we've outlined a few just key talking points about the second piece here, particularly about how we think this would actually undermine some of the collaborative planning efforts that have taken place to date around centers and stationary plans. And for growing cities, would certainly lose the ability to plan and zone for future commercial areas and job centers and the like. Norm.
So just going on Representative Ward's bills, the discussion we had with him some weeks ago was just build more houses. I want more housing.
Mhm.
We've heard that for a decade now and it hasn't helped anything. So I like the approach that we're taking to oppose, but, and be more strategic about it. I think we need to continue that.
Perfect. Great. Thank you, Norm. So again, staff recommendation is oppose as drafted. You can see our quick snapshot reasons why here. Any thoughts? So we'll do Councilmember Bradshaw, we will do a motion at the end to kind of ratify the starting point with some of these things. So that's why I want to make sure everybody's comfortable with where we're at as of this moment. I am going to be meeting with Representative Ward in a couple of days to walk through all the concerns we've heard. And to his credit, he came and met with our LPC subgroup on housing and had a pretty vigorous discussion for about 45 minutes with him on these bills. So I'll be relaying further feedback to him. So I appreciate his willingness to chat and listen. Okay, I'm going to keep going then. All right. We're going to do state surplus land before parking, but these are the items that are still being negotiated within the CHOP. State surplus land, the top 2/3 of this slide, we presented to you the prior LPC. The league board met in October, and the focus we were having then was potentially requiring all public entities to inventory our land, identify what surplus land existed that could be used for housing. As of, January 13th today. Great. So as of this morning, we're anticipating a slightly different area of focus this upcoming session. First, we think we know that the priority is going to be on state surplus land rather than every bit of public land. So the prioritization is going to be surplus state land with that nexus of converting that surplus state land into affordable owner-occupied housing. So whereas a couple months ago, we came to you and said, be prepared for a requirement that we all inventory our public land. We still think that's going to come as part of the state housing plan. But in terms of starting next week, the prioritization is going to be surplus state land. And I think the easy place to start there would be with UDOT. Could be broader than that, but that would be the easy place to start. Now, remember, state land is not subject to local zoning. So right now, if the state had a parcel of land in Cameron City cannot say you can only do 1 unit to the acre on there, or Cameron City can't say you shall do 100 units to the acre on there. State land is not subject to that local zoning. State land does need to fit into local infrastructure. So you think about, Taylorsville's in the back. Taylorsville got a huge influx of state employees. They converted an old American Express building, right? It was an American Express building into a state campus. The city had some land use approvals as part of that, but the city couldn't say no because you don't have zoning authority over that parcel. But you did confirm that there'd be enough infrastructure, right? Mayor's nodding her head and John's nodding his head. So we've highlighted this principle that the board articulated, figuring out how the potential development of these parcels fits within city infrastructure plans. And that should say and rather than and Z, but and zoning. So more than anything, we wanted to make you aware of the focus shift. This session is going to be on state land first, as opposed to making all of us do inventories. That's still to come. And so we're still proceeding with that staff recommendation on number 3. But this has been identified by many stakeholders at the Capitol as the top priority in the housing space. So we're going to be spending a lot of time over the next few weeks trying to figure out what that fit looks like with infrastructure. So with that being said, here's a Slido question for you. It's just a quick snapshot. So again, this land is not subject to zoning. And one of the questions we've been asking is, it's not subject to zoning as long as it is state land. At some point, it gets sold into private hands. Or it doesn't, and it stays in a community land trust. It stays in a community land trust, not subject to zoning. Gets sold to a private property owner, becomes subject to zoning. Should there be essentially an entitlement on that state land? So there's an expectation that this state land could start at X units to the acre for single family and X units to the acre to condos, but it would then be still subject to how to serve with local infrastructure. I've been in several meetings on this topic over the last few weeks. Every meeting, they say, we know we have to work with local governments on infrastructure. So then the question is, do you just put in statute the requirements around owner occupancy and a starting point on the density? Okay, so that's the framework, quick snapshot from this group. We'll leave the question open for another moment here.
Pam,
I heard my name.
while people
Councilmember.
are answering, has there been any talk about preempting on revenue sources? What we saw in my district this last time, of course, attached to the MLB development, is that I will get new constituents because they will redevelop not just the fairgrounds, but they're going to redevelop the Department of Ag, the natural resources, all of those things. But we've been preempted out of any revenue because of a political subdivision. And I get worried that they think that's a really good idea. And you all inherit students in your school districts and streets to plow and police calls to answer without a revenue stream because they're going to give it to a private developer. And that privilege tax will then become infrastructure money.
Excellent question. And I appreciate you bringing that up. So each parcel of state land is a little bit different, right? So if you've got Greenfield in Cameron City that is adjacent to a highway and it's currently just vacant ground, we're collecting zero property tax off of that land because it's non-taxable, but we're really not servicing it either. If it gets developed into 100 housing units, as the council members indicated, now if it stays in public ownership, then we have 100 housing units and 500 people that we're now servicing, but without a property tax to pay for it. And that issue has come up in every meeting. Like, we get that that's an issue. So how do we solve it? And we have pushed back at going you brought it up. So going a Fair Park style approach or a MIDA style approach, we've pushed back on that type of approach. And so then the question back to us has been, okay, so how do we do it differently? And so we're still trying to work through those questions. And honestly, I would love the feedback of Salt Lake City of, I don't want to pick your scabs, but it would be very helpful to know from your experience there and then other cities that have dealt with similar situations, like, how do we do this in a way that makes the most sense? Interestingly, I learned this morning, Colorado has a statewide land trust, and they've used that model to try to develop housing on public property. And then the state of New York has done this pretty extensively too. So we're going to be digging into those models as well.
Hey,
Yep, Dave.
Cameron, is the state going to put a hold on surplusing land while they figure out this policy? I'm dealing with a guy who wants to buy a parcel of state land. He can only fit 2 single-family homes on it, so it's not a big deal.
Mhm.
But he said, they're going to surplus it soon. They told me at Region 1, they're going to do it, blah, blah, blah. And I said, whoa, it would be nice for the state. And so this is just something in concept. It would be nice for the state to put a hold on all their surplusing activities until
While they figure this out.
While they figure this out.
Yeah, that's a great point.
Yep.
That's a great point. Okay, any other thoughts in this space? So nothing to recommend yet, but just wanted to make you aware of that change of direction. Okay, I mentioned condos already, so I'm going to circle back up to parking. As a reminder, back in August, September, LPC approved of the general direction of A, B, and C that we were going to, city can't require garages so long as the unit's affordable owner occupied. Tandem defined as 2, so long as units affordable owner occupied. And the city requires a garage and it's structurally accessible, so you can actually fit a vehicle in there, then it must count toward the city's parking minimum. The Home Builders and Private Rights Coalition have pushed for much broader language defining the number of parking stalls per residential unit, can't require things in development agreements, et cetera. So they've got a bigger list. Senator Fillmore has told us that he's going to put in a bill a standard definition of a residential parking stall size, and he wants tandem to equal 2 spots. As we've pushed back on him and have had meetings with other state leaders, quite honestly, it has been a very, very tough hill to climb on this one. And there have been a couple times we've been basically laughed at by legislators of, are you really saying that tandem shouldn't count as 2? And we make all the arguments about the spillover and challenges to the neighborhoods, but it is an uphill climb at the Capitol around 3A and 3B. Carson undertook some research that we told you about last LPC, and he spent a lot of time in December looking at about 40 cities' ordinances around parking. And based on that feedback, what we found is the majority of those 40 cities, most of which were rapid growth cities and high growth cities, most of those cities had some sort of standard that was in this space of outdoor stall of 9x18, covered space of 10x20. Most cities were in that space. And then most cities, those smaller percentage, were counting tandem as 2. So I'll relay that back to you based on the research. So we're at a point now where this issue is a big deal. Senator Fillmore within the Commission on Housing Affordability. We never like the legislature dictating specific design standards like this to local governments. But the feedback we're getting from legislators is, what's the policy difference between Kaysville and Clearfield having different sizes of garages, or Farmington and Bountiful having different sizes of garages? And a lot of our communities are in that space, in a comparable space now. So in light of that, we're kind of at go, no go now. So we're going to ask you 2 questions via Slido. How high of a priority would opposing a statewide off-street parking stall size of 10x20 for covered parking and 9x18 for uncovered parking be for your city? And we're talking about this in the context of single-family houses and townhomes. So not apartments or apartment complexes, covered parking, uncovered. So you think about all the different pieces out there, not just in the housing space, but all the different ways we're dealing with the legislature. How big of a priority is this to your city? Because we need to be able to make a recommendation back to the league board and league officers about the direction here. And Senator Fillmore's, I'm meeting with him later this week. So I'd like to be able to come back to him and say, yep, this is high priority, we're dying on the hill. Or, we need, if we're going to go down this path, we need your support about this, and this as well. So as you're filling out this question, there'll be 2 more Slido questions related to this. One that's on tandem, and then one that's on code enforcement. Because one of the key arguments we've heard from folks is that if we can't size the garage, parking spills over into the street, then it's a challenge on code enforcement. So we'll have a question about code enforcement in a moment. I'll leave this question open for just a moment. And then Jared, I need to save you some time, but we're going till 2, so you're good. I'm going to go 10 more seconds. Okay, this is same question, but now counting tandem, one in front of the other, like this. Parking stalls as 2 separate off-street parking units. Again, single-family townhome. That's what we're referencing, not apartment complexes. Otherwise, how high of a priority is this in your city? The next question will be code enforcement, and then I'll turn to Jared for land use task force. Okay, I'll leave this one open for another 20 seconds. Now, I've had a couple people who've texted me saying, like, we have additional feedback, and that's great too. We're going to be sending them kind of the follow-up email by tomorrow. Goes a little more in depth, and we'll have some open-ended questions there. And of course, you can always text us or email us to give us feedback. Like this is kind of our last prep week before things get real next week. So welcome any and all feedback via text, email, phone, whatever, and then watch for the follow-up survey. Okay, I'm moving on. Other rumblings in the land use space. Mentioned Representative Walter's short-term rental bill, not yet numbered, but we shared it with our tourism work group last week and got some positive feedback there. We're anticipating language from the new freshman Representative Tracy Miller around local government childcare regulations, so stay tuned there. Senator Fillmore's got a bill around the Office of Property Rights Ombudsman. Senator Colmore's got a bill around large-scale projects. And then let's talk code enforcement here. Representative Thurston, Representative Shepherd are looking at a bill in the code enforcement space that would give us more authority under the state code enforcement statute around repeat offenders. And those repeat offenders could be around rental units that should be owner occupied. It could be occupancy, but it could also be parking. So if if we say, we can live with these changes in the parking space, but in exchange, we need to be able to have a little more teeth to enforce against bad actors. This type of approach of imposing higher fines on repeat code violations could be a way to do it. This could also help in the illegal short-term rental space. So again, don't have specific language in front of you yet, but just want to get a sense for each of your individual cities of how high a priority this type of legislation would be in light of everything else that we've described. So I'll leave this open about 30 seconds as Jared comes up. Oh, nope, as Justin comes up. Or do I have one more slide? Oh, you're going to, great, okay. So I'll just leave this open as you come up, Justin, and we'll keep rocking and rolling. I hit all my stuff.
All right. Oh, that's all right. We'll go back. It's fine. So we're gonna jump forward. So last week, there was a press conference by several legislators around public safety in the southern border crisis, the title of their document there. Many of you have seen this. I'm not going to spend a lot of time on this today. This is going to come out when we share the slides tomorrow in the follow-up email. But a lot of things around enhanced penalties, around impounding vehicles for unlicensed drivers, E-Verify, et cetera. What I'm looking for is if you have not yet checked in with your chiefs on this one, asking you to check in with your chiefs on this one, get us any feedback you can. Again, this document will come out tomorrow in the follow-up email. If you'd like it before that, feel free to reach out. I can shoot it over to you. But just want to get some feedback on this one. We'll have more time to spend talking about it. There's a whole host of bills in this space in the legislative session. So our ask one more time, check with your chiefs, look at this, make sure there's any technical concerns you may have, please send them our way. And with that, I'll kick it back to Jared.
Okay, last year there was a privacy bill, HB 491, and many of you, including myself, didn't know the best way to implement those provisions. There's some good news though. We've had some really good, productive conversations with the Office of Data Privacy and how they plan on moving forward. We've gone over some of those concerning provisions and that they have removed for us, and likely will extend the deadline to come up with a privacy policy for your city. There will be forms provided to make it a lot easier. There will also be, you'll notice their privacy program framework. I would recommend each of you looking through that, and that's found on that website below. Just as a clarification point, there is no N on purpose there. That is their website. So government is no N. I tried it with an N, and oops, something broke. So no N. So there are good things happening in this space, and they are continually collaborating with us. And there will be a bill out soon. It's being worked through right now, and I would just recommend you going through that with your police department, because a lot of the implications will be with your police department. But like I said, I've gone through a draft bill with Chris Bramwell, the Chief Privacy Officer, and I'm pleased about where we're at. There still are a few things that I think need to be addressed, and he has said repeatedly, we're happy to work with you. We're happy to look at that and go through that. So just an update there. Now we get on to any questions with the GRAMA privacy before I move on to the land use task force. So this is a lot on this slide and a lot happening on this slide as well. You'll notice that the asterisk up at the top is those things that have been completed and sent to legislative research and general counsel, and those with the other symbol there that I don't know what it's called are still in negotiation. So I want to point out too, on the left side, you'll see all of those have been recommended by the league, except one, the annexation, and we've been a very big part of that too. But you'll notice that all of those have been sent to legislative research and general counsel, except one, the design standards, which Cam will talk about later on. And so there's a lot to, I think that there's a lot that was good that is going to the legislature on various things, cleanup bills. For example, the land use noticing costs, I don't know how many cities have had this experience, costing thousands and thousands of dollars just to update their zoning code. Because it's a land use amendment and it affects big areas and big swaths of land and a lot of people being affected. And so this basically does away with needing to have a Class A notice. And there's other things here, some more clarifications on the land use appeals part of it. We've been able to remove public hearings from land use appeals, so that there's not that public clamor within those land use appeals, and I think that that will be a good policy step forward. I want to talk a little bit about the ones on the right here. The fire access roads, this is just clarifying current law, but it was quite from 2018, there were some changes made that made it actually more complicated to understand what we could require and what we couldn't require. And this just clarifies what was already or should have already been in state code. The identical plans, I would consider this a minor change, but it's definitely a meaningful process change. So that when identical plans come in, and that's identified in the statute of what an identical plan is, that there's a process set up. And so if you've got multiple plans of the same, that are the same, that those don't need a all-out review because they're the same. So, and I know various cities that currently already do this, so I don't think that it would be it's going to be a big change with your cities. There's others on this list with the Land Use Task Force, special districts, little effect on us, if any. The private maintenance of public infrastructure. Right now, there are some cities that require public or private developers or property owners to maintain public infrastructure. And that is concerning both from a legal standpoint as well as a political standpoint, requiring private maintenance of public infrastructure. If you think of storm drains, that's something that I don't think cities want to have maintained by private entities because it's a public infrastructure. And so we've clarified that. There are a few changes that we still are looking at and going over just to clarify some of the concerns that were brought up to us. The OPRO, Office of Property Rights Ombudsman, this is just changing. It will affect some who, but it resolves those disputes quicker. It allows for the option to go out to a private attorney to issue that opinion based upon the option of either party. We are still working through some of those concerns about forcing cities or developers to use a private attorney to issue that ruling. So we're still going over some of those negative effects, and we'll have more later. I'm going to skip over the boundary lines, still working on a few of those items with definitions for lot and parcel boundary lines. Let me talk a little bit more now about the building officials HB 58. And there's feedback that we need from you on plan review timing, bonding, and landscaping. So those are what I'd like to turn to now. Now, HB 58 is a bill brought on by Representative Tom Peterson, and it's in response to the OPLR, which is the Office of Professional Licensing Review. And their report is not yet final. It will be coming out likely at the end of this week. And the league has been given access to that, limited access to that, to review that and provide comments. We've provided those comments, and there are some things that we'll like, and there's some things that we won't like. And as we went through this, there was a finding that said basically most municipalities are doing a great job with plan review timing, with inspections, with plan reviews, all of that. But there are some cities that are causing 90% of the legislation that happens. And so as we spoke to a friendly legislator and who used to be a city council member, and we talked to him about his perspective on all things building inspection, building official related. And he said that essentially he named off and rattled off 10 cities and said these are those that are causing challenges, and you would see a change if you were to address those concerns with those 10 cities. We've been given that list, and if you're on that list and we have specifics, we'll come and talk to you and say, how can we make this better? What is the specific thing that is happening within your city? And I wish Harriman was one of them so I could just call out Todd Sheeran, but they're not. No, we're not going to go that route because we'd like specifics instead of just saying, oh, we want actual specifics to say, hey, these are specific things that can be changed, actionable items that can be changed. Find those cities. I hear a warrant, So I want to move from the OPLR report, which will be issued later this week, to the HBA 58 and the language that is put in there. Representative Peterson, his bill is in response to the OPLR's audit and will be report. And so these are some of the things that the OPLR have recommended. The largest one, I think, being that there will be changes to the licensing of building officials. Currently, right now in code, there's no requirement for building officials to be licensed by the state. That will change. Your building official will need to have 6 years of experience in some sort of building related field. contractor, architect, plumber, electrical, some sort of field, and 6 years of experience combined related to that experience. They will also need to take 40 hours of management training. I don't know what that's going to look like, but that is on in the bill. And we're still having discussions with Representative Peterson on his bill. There will be talking about those 10 cities. One of the things that was recommended by the OPLR is now in Representative Peterson's bill is essentially a report card that is published online and also shared with the legislature every year about how the building department of each city is doing. So if there are issues and a lot of complaints with a building official, that will be investigated by the Utah Building Code Commission. And those recommendations of whether it be changes or interpretations of building code, or whether it be calling out and working with certain cities, that will be their role now. There's a few new definitions added to what unprofessional conduct is, and that one is failing to make reasonable efforts to maintain a current knowledge of amendments to code, and two, a building inspector engaging in retaliatory actions against individuals or companies that file complaints or question the local regulator's decisions. When we've negotiated with the PRC and Property Rights Coalition and the Home Builders Association, one of the, as we've said, well, let us just go and talk to certain cities. Well, they're always afraid of being retaliated against for bringing up that a city is not doing what they should be doing. Now, maybe there may be some legitimacy in that, and there may not be. But we want solutions. We want resolutions to problems that they see. And particularly, like I've said, there have been friendly legislators that have told us, multiple people have said, and they've been the same cities that brought up from different angles saying, these are the cities that are causing 90% of the problems. And you would see 90% of that legislation go away if those issues were discussed. So, any questions before I move on to a different subject? Norm.
So Jared, on this, the second or the first dash under unprofessional conduct, who gets to decide what reasonable efforts are? Who is that? If they do their 40 hours of training, for instance, does that qualify them for having made reasonable efforts? That's really troubling to me.
Right. No, and that's the UBCC. That would be the Utah Building Code Commission. Again, we're working through language. We'll take your comment into consideration on working with that language. Yeah, there most certainly there are what is retaliatory actions, right? So there's things that are still in the bill that we need to discuss and get through before this is ready for prime time, and even though it's been released. So thank you for that comment. Okay. The next, this is one that we would like feedback on time review, or I'm sorry, building permit plan review timing. Currently in 10.6.160, the code section says we have to do a 14-day plan review of the building permit application within 14 days. And that starts upon the submission of a complete application. Currently in code, there's no There's a list of what a complete application should be, but there is no timeline associated with how long we get to determine whether we have been given a complete application, meaning that all of those documents have been sent into us and we have all those documents and that they're filled out. They may be incorrect, but that they're filled out. So right now, there's really an indefinite amount of time. The complaint that we receive is, well, there makes no difference if there's a 14-day plan review if it's taking you 20 days to determine whether the application has been complete or not. So this is, so what has been recommended and suggested, and I'd like your feedback, is that the completion time, the time to review whether those documents, which are currently listed in 10-6160 of being a complete application, how long that takes you. When I asked someone that has done this and regularly, they said it takes about 15 minutes to determine whether the application is complete. He said there are differences when you've got different building permit applications as far as how big those projects are and those houses are and the complexity of it. But on average, it takes about 15 minutes. Timing for plan review for one submission, building permit application submission, to review those documents, he has said it takes about 4 hours for each one, on average. I've never done it. So that was his response, and he's done a lot of them. So here's my question, and these two questions will be sent out in a survey, but I want to explain what these questions mean. I want to know what the average number of days for all of your departments to get back to review that building permit application for completeness. How long does it take you to determine whether the application is complete? Some cities, I know, do it online, and they consider that completion the second that's submitted online. As I brought up to legislators, well, I can submit a blank piece of paper, and that's not going to do anything. That's not a complete application. You've just submitted a blank piece of paper, even though you've said you've submitted the right document. So what are we going to do about that? So that's what I would like to know. I think many cities are already under the 14 days for plan review, and many cities don't take longer than 2 days to determine whether the application is complete. So coming back to these questions, I would like to know what is the average number of days for all departments, not just the building department, to review for completeness a building permit application for one, single-family homes, townhomes, and duplexes, because under the code, those are all categorized into the same lump, and multifamily housing. The second question is, how long does it take you to complete a plan review? Like I said, in the code, we have 14 days for single-family home, townhomes and duplexes, and 21 days for multifamily. So that is going to be going out in a survey that we'll send out today or tomorrow. Please look for that. The reason why this information will be helpful for us is to know to what degree will this impact your city. Yeah.
Could you just make a clarification on the survey? Are these entitled lots or are these vacant rare pieces of ground? Because you may have an 8-lot duplex, 8-lot subdivision of duplexes, and you have to review all the land use portions of it. So the difference in this question is very different whether it's an entitled lot or a lot of raw ground.
So we are talking specifically about building permit application. So every building permit application has to be reviewed. If it's a building permit application being submitted for building, you've got to review it within 14 days. So it's per building permit application is what we're looking for. That would be entitled lots. Yes. We have 0 minutes. We do have 0 minutes. Well, that's Cam's problem. Notice Cam's not in here. We'll throw this all in your fun survey. See how they cut me off like that? I enjoy talking too much. So I'll turn the time over to Justin. Okay, well, I'll keep going.
I don't know what Cam went, but.
What do you want to do? Oh, we're gonna jump really quick. How about this? Yeah, we'll put these out. We have, just so you know, there are currently 281 bills numbered. There's plenty of out there. We're gonna put out the survey tomorrow. I know some of you are shaking your heads. It could be worse. It just depends what's in them mostly. The number doesn't tell us anything. We just like to throw that up to help us all lose sleep. But yeah, watch for the survey tomorrow. We need those updates. Just a couple other quick updates on this one. There's ongoing discussions about the transportation utility fee. Many of you have been in discussions on that one. There is going to be a battle looming specifically with the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints over who pays that fee. We do expect to see a bill that comes out that will just try to exempt churches and perhaps other nonprofits, but specifically churches out. Talking about broadband fees, public safety fees, retail incentives, there are some slight modifications potentially coming here. This was a bill that passed a few years ago. We negotiated on greatly, but there has been actually the Senate who reached out to us and said, are there things here that we could work with? So wait for that one. There could be movement on that one. Lots of other bills open, sales tax, tourism. For those of you who've been involved in the TRT working group, Representative Bolander has been, he has a draft. We've seen the draft. We're not allowed to share it out anywhere yet, but that one will come out soon. But there are just a lot of other issues coming. We want to make sure that you know we're watching them. And with that, Kate, I will kick it back to you. And by the way, it is 2:00 on these clocks up here, if you didn't know that. These ones are like 7 minutes behind. It's not just that we're bad at reading clocks.
It says 2:03 on my watch. Okay.
So it's 2:00.
So we've been asked if we will make a motion to ratify the direction from our discussions today for the ULCT staff. I need a maker of that motion. Okay. Well, I recognize Victoria Petro from Salt Lake for the motion and Norm for the second. All in favor? We'll hear any discussion. Seeing none because it's 2:00. All in favor, please say aye. Aye. Any opposed? All right. Now we need our favorite motion. All right. Would you like to discuss? All in favor, please say aye. Aye. All right, I'll see you all at Local Officials Day.